I'm Damian Fasciani, head news editor for DCComicsNews.com, and this week we bring you an exclusive. We go head-to-head with Marc Guggenheim, the executive producer of the hit show Arrow. During this interview, Marc gives us an insight into what started the show, parallels between Arrow and The Dark Knight, the comic book adaptation, and much more. So sit with us and spend 16 minutes to go through this great interview with Marc and DCComicsNews.com. Stay tuned.
Some of these are regarding into you personally, so we just wanted to build a bit of a profile on you before we get into the show. So I'll start off with the first question. On your Twitter account, you've got a short little bio that says there you're a recovering attorney and a writer of stuff. To paint a picture for us, can you give us a bit of an insight into that and also a small bio into yourself?
Yeah, well, I used to be an attorney. I practiced in Boston before moving out here 14 years ago to work in television. But since working in television, I've sort of branched out into a wide variety of other sort of areas, including movies and video games and comic books. So that's why I say I'm a writer of stuff. I write, a little bit of everything. And I try to pick projects that expand, that span a wide variety of different, genres and mediums. And occasionally, because I'm an attorney, some of that stuff involves, law, the law genres. But other times it's, pure superhero. Other times it's, a little bit of a mix. Sometimes it's just a family drama. It totally depends on what opportunities come my way and what I find creatively interesting.
Fantastic. With our second question, can you give us a bit of a background onto how the comic book character of Arrow made its way into its own TV show?
Yeah, I for a number of years have been working with Greg Berlanti, who had an idea as to how to bring Green Arrow to the TV screen, and we were working on a pilot together. I was writing a law pilot for Warner Brothers that he was producing, and he asked if I would also do the show Arrow with him. And I've worked with Greg for almost a decade now, and he and I and a guy named Michael Green co-wrote the Green Lantern movie. So this was an opportunity to do another live-action superhero project, and that's an easy thing always to say yes to. And we sort of dove in and developed a pitch for the studio and the network, and they loved it, and we sort of did it all very under the radar. We brought in Andrew Kreisberg, who we both worked on Eli Stone, to help write the teleplay with me, because I was, in addition to writing the Arrow pilot, I was also producing this law show that I'd mentioned. So sort of the show, the script was well received by the studio network, and we were sort of off to the races. It all came together in relatively short order in comparison to, I think, a lot of TV projects. I think once we locked in David Nutter to direct the pilot, David is like the Steven Spielberg of television, and his record on pilots that go to series is it's in the 90th percentile. Getting, David was a critical piece, and then, of course, casting Stephen Amell, who was the very first person to come in and audition for the show. So the show's sort of been blessed from day one, in the sense that we've always gotten the absolute best people and always the absolute best actors. When you start off with all those advantages, it's pretty hard to screw up.
No, I think you guys have done a wonderful job. I was in New York City covering a few other stories at the time when Arrow started to come out, and I certainly didn't know anything was coming in that regard. It kind of just came out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden billboards and everything are up in Times Square. So I think you guys have done a wonderful job with the show.
Cool, thank you.
Growing up yourself, did you happen to have a favourite DC character that you liked?
Yeah, I mean, I probably have to go with Batman. I loved Batman as a kid. I loved a lot of the DC characters, but Batman was definitely a favorite. Certainly Batman and the Dark Knight movies by Chris Nolan have been a huge inspiration for all of us involved with Arrow. So I feel like I'm getting a chance to do a little bit of Batman. Green Arrow's always sort of been a little bit of a Batman analog, and we don't shy away from those origins. And I've also had a chance to write a few Batman comics in my day. So, it's always been a dream come true for me.
Fantastic. Specifically onto the show, I wanted to ask you a question around the character of Oliver Queen / Arrow. So we have the comic book adaptation of Oliver Queen / the Hood Arrow, and then we have your series, and we see a take of Oliver Queen there. As the show goes on, is it important to bridge any gaps between the comic book adaptation of the main character and also the character that you guys are building in the show, and if so, why?
Well, unlike Superman and Batman, whose sort of origin stories are very sort of set and have these sort of critical elements that really can't change, Oliver Queen's story it's changed over the years in the comics. There's no real one version that's quote-unquote canon. So as a result, we've felt a lot of license to pick and choose and cherry-pick from various different origin stories the elements that we like the most, as well as invent and bring to it elements that aren't from the comics. We sort of always use the comics, both Oliver Queen specifically, but sort of all the DC comics in general, as a jumping off point, as a point of inspiration for the show. Very cognizant all the while that we're sort of doing our own thing, and we're developing a show to be its own entity. And when the comic book is helpful, we use it, and where it's not helpful or it's not leading to the story that we're trying to tell, we sort of shy away from it. And I think what's great about the character of Green Arrow is that as the many decades of publication and stories have shown, he's a character that can withstand several different kinds of interpretations. And I think that's always the mark of a really strong character. And our interpretation of Oliver Queen is just one of many, many, many different interpretations.
Okay. For my next question in regards to the character again in the storyline, I think you've already answered parts of it. So with the writers of the show, can you give us an insight into the process of how the studio evolves and manages the story, and where the inspiration is drawn from, and in particular, are there any particular storylines of Arrow, or a mashup of several?
I think basically what happens is for each episode we will publish what we call a story page or a story arena, which is usually like a 2-page synopsis of the various different storylines separated out that the episode that we're working on will cover. And the studio will weigh in with thoughts and observations and sometimes questions. Sometimes they may suggest, a character turn. Sometimes they may suggest that something happened in a different way. Sometimes they'll ask a question that will force us to rethink our approach. So, they're very much sort of a partner, in the process, and the dialogue is a two-way street. And then the network also chimes in, and it's a very similar kind of relationship. And then sort of once that has happened with the story document, we go off and we break the story in detail, which is sort of figuring out what happens in each scene, and then write a script and go through the same process again. The studio will read the script, make suggestions, give notes, ask questions. We'll revise the script accordingly and do the same for the network. And somewhere in between that process, DC Comics will actually also weigh in. DC Entertainment, the division of DC that is sort of in charge of translating their comic book properties to live action, and animated film and TV, they'll provide their thoughts as well. And we always say we'll take a good idea from anybody, we'll take a good note from anybody, and it's sort of our job to always filter everything sort of through the lens of of what we're trying to accomplish, and try to use the notes to tell the best story we can, make the best episode possible.
Fantastic. Onto the fans, how much of an effect, if any, do the fans have in regards to how the show evolves, including the characters in the show? And secondly, on that, how does the show reach out to the fans and gather feedback? I've seen Stephen Amell himself reach out on his Facebook page, and I've joined that. I've liked that page, and he does a great job with that. Is there anything else on top of that?
Well, I think, all of us, the writers and a couple of the directors and all of our actors, we're all very involved on Twitter. And a lot of us have linked our Twitter and Facebook accounts. So if we post something to Twitter, it shows up on our Facebook page. And we'll, I think, collectively we interact with the fans quite a bit. And when time permits, I'll watch the Twitter feed while the episode is airing, just to see what moments are playing for people, and try to sort of get some feedback. And I'll read reviews of the show online the next morning. And it's funny, we don't, I think it's a very dangerous thing when anyone sort of writes to what the fans want. Stan Lee once said, give the fans what they need, not what they want. And I think that's a good rule of thumb that I personally always sort of try to follow, because if you're just giving the fans what they want, they're never going to be surprised. And oftentimes what they think they want isn't what they really want. So it can be sort of a very dangerous road. That said, it's like I said, we're very much involved with Twitter and the internet, and we're aware of what the fans are saying out there. And I think that awareness probably creeps in on some subliminal level. But the one nice thing about the show, given where we currently stand, is the show is working. So whatever we're doing is working, and I think as a result we all sort of feel like, okay, let's just keep going the way things are going. If we're responding to the fans, then we're at least doing so, it seems, in the right way, and striking the right balance between, like Stanley said, what they want and what they need.
Yep. Okay. In regards to generically other TV shows and other comic book adaptations with motion pictures, we often hear rumours around how much things cost as far as budget and time it takes to actually put together some of the TV shows like Arrow. Can you give us a very brief insight into what the effort is in order to complete each episode, both pre and post production, as far as time, or if you can share any approximate figures around budget?
Yeah, it's funny. It's I would say quite a bit of time. It is not easy making a show that looks like a movie every week, and that's the goal that we sort of set for ourselves. Is we always are going for like a cinema quality experience. And it's hard because we're doing it on a TV show schedule and a TV show budget. And usually, with respect to the budget, it's about doing more with less. And we often talk about trying to cram 20 pounds into a 5-pound bag. And I can't really even say that there's a typical process that we engage in each week, because the truth of the matter is that every episode presents its own set of unique challenges. The good of the show is the bad of its production. It's a different kind of episode every week. The stunts are different. It's not a formulaic show. We're not, it's not a wash, rinse, repeat sort of kind of series like a lot of network television can tend to be. As a result, every week we're faced with new problems, and therefore we need to invent new solutions. I will say we have like the best production team and the best crew that I've ever worked with up in Vancouver, making the show week in, week out, day in, day out. And the truth is they are constantly blowing me away by the things that they are able to achieve from a talent perspective and from a time perspective and a money perspective. It doesn't happen easily. It is all the result of a lot of very, very hard work by just very talented people, and there's no magic to it. At the end of the day, everyone just rolls it. Gets, we publish the script, and everyone, including myself, rolls up their sleeves and figures out how we're going to pull this off. And every week we wonder, can we pull this off? And somehow by miracle every week we manage to do so. But yes, every week I do ask myself, is this the week where we don't pull it off? It's a high wire act. But it's the kind of high wire act that you can perform when you have incredibly talented people working alongside you.
It's fantastic. Holistically, in regards to the show, if we look medium to long term, what does success look like for the show? Is it centered around more telling a specific story and then maturing it from that point, or is it getting through a certain number of seasons?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm definitely a believer in quality over quantity. We don't have a certain number of seasons or episodes in mind. I think, for me, I measure success of the show in terms of audience response. Last year the show was very successful. I think the show was well regarded, but this year we're seeing a level of appreciation and love of the show that is on several quantums of magnitude greater than we were experiencing last year, and that's really sort of how I measure success. Are people watching the show and are they enjoying it? And as long as that's happening, we'll continue to make the show. It would be great if we were able to go at least 5 years and tell the 5-year story on the island, but the truth of the matter is that, in success, I don't see why the show couldn't go on for much longer than that. We're not lacking for stories on the show, and as long as there's an audience, there will be a willingness on our part to tell these stories.
Fantastic, and I think we're sure that the show will go on for quite a long time. Guys, look, thank you very much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.